Okay, so Andrew Schmidt is here from Cataraqui Conservation. I am here from Quinte Conservation, and you can see I'm not used to holding this, so we'll see how this goes too. The reason that both of our conservation authorities are here today is because both of us cover Greater Napanee. Conservation authorities are based on a watershed boundary basis, not on political lines, so very often one municipality will have more than one conservation authority in them. So that is why both of us are here today. We do understand, obviously, that this is very challenging for everybody in terms of the property that they've lost or structures that they've lost, and so we really want to thank you for being here and also to listen to us so that we can explain to you a little bit about what our roles and responsibility are when it comes to high water and your shoreline and properties and that kind of thing. Okay, I can't see these. Oh, here. Okay, so this is just a little rundown of what we're going to do. We'll talk really quickly about who we are and what we do. We'll talk about two of our main roles that we have, flood forecasting and warning, and then planning and regulations. And then Andrew will wrap up with some key messages, and then we'll have the question and answer period afterwards. So, in Ontario, there are 36 conservation authorities. The Conservation Authorities Act initially passed in 1946, so we've been around for over 70 years. The majority of the conservation authorities are kind of clustered in southern Ontario. There are 5 conservation authorities that are up in the north, and we are mandated to ensure the conservation, restoration, and responsible management of Ontario's water, land, and natural habitats through programs that balance human, environmental, and economic needs. So this is what we try to do, and we try to achieve this through various programs that we have. So Cataraqui watershed, just to give you an idea, covers the eastern side of Greater Napanee. It was formed in 1964, and it covers more than 3,800 square kilometers of land and extends from the long reach of the Bay of Quinte all the way out to Rockville. It does cover 11 watersheds in its region, which also then covers 11 municipalities and a population of over 210,000 people. Quinte Conservation is to the western side of Greater Napanee, and it was formed in 1996 as an amalgamation of 3 separate conservation authorities. The Moira River and the Napanee region were formed in 1947, and Prince Edward region was formed in 1965. And then in 1996, those 3 amalgamated together. So we cover more than 6,000 square kilometers of land, and we have 18 municipalities with a population of around 117,000 people. So in terms of our programs and services that we have, each program and service that we have is created with an overarching principle of conserving and enhancing our natural environment. And so those programs run the gamut from monitoring to dam operations to low water response to education. And then the 2 that we're going to talk about today are the flood forecasting and warning and the planning and regulations section. Those are obviously the most 2 important for you guys. So we'll go through flood forecasting and warning first. So when it comes to flood forecasting and warning, there are 2 kind of services that we provide. We are delegated by the province to provide flood forecasting and warning services for our inland lakes and streams. So that is streams that we have gauges on, that we collect information on, that we might operate their dams. Oh good, they're going to open a door now. Get some airflow through here. And so we follow our dams and our gauges in real-time data. That data gets collected by our staff. Our staff review that, they run it through models, and they make decisions on whether or not they're going to issue a flood warning. If that happens, that information gets sent out to our municipalities, it gets sent out to the public so that it can then be disseminated out to the public and residents as quickly as possible. The other thing that we do is we provide a service for Lake Ontario and the St. Lawrence River, in the sense that in that situation, we do not make the decisions on whether or not something is going to be a flood hazard or should be a flood warning. In that sense, we actually gather the information that we get from the International Joint Commission or from our partner agencies, and then we disseminate that information. So in one sense, for our inland lakes and rivers, we are the decision maker when it comes to that kind of thing, and then for the larger Lake Ontario system, we are the ones that are trying to help spread that message out as quickly as possible to our member municipalities and then also to the public. When it comes to water levels on the Great Lakes, the conservation authorities don't have a role in that. We have a role within our individual watersheds for the water levels that we can control, but we do not control nor do we manage the water levels on the Great Lakes. Sometimes there's a little confusion there because we all flow into the Great Lakes, but when it comes to the water management of Lake Ontario, we do not cover that area. So when it comes to flood forecasting as well, there are obviously lots of partnerships and key roles and responsibilities that everybody has to be aware of. And so from a Conservation Authority perspective, like I said, we are there to monitor and forecast local conditions. We facilitate communications with water managers who operate structures. We are there to issue flood messages if they need to be issued. And then of course we advise our member municipalities. And then what Andrew's going to talk about is the part that comes with regulating development. That's a big part of our role. And when it comes to municipalities and their role in flooding, their role is to also share that flood message to all of you, to respond to the emergencies appropriately, and then to also develop and implement emergency policies for those events. We wanted to put this slide up just to show you, and I'm sure that Sarah will have a slide similar to this, that'll show you the entire Great Lakes Basin. So you can see that Lake Ontario is at kind of the tail end, and we circled where we are, where Quinte and Cataraqui are, just so you can see that we're really at the kind of the butt end of the of the system there. But 85% of the water that flows into Lake Ontario comes from the Great Lakes systems. There's only 15% of the water that flows into Lake Ontario that actually comes from the Great Lakes Basin. So there's a tremendous amount of water that's coming in. But this was really just to show you where we are geographically in the grand scheme of things.
Thank you, Charlene. Hopefully everyone can hear me. I'm Andrew Schmidt. I'm with Cataraqui Conservation. Been there for about 12 years now. And I'm in charge of the Development Review Services Program at Cataraqui Conservation, and that's what I'm going to be talking with you about, is development review. Bit of a dry subject, but what can I say? It's planning and permitting, basically, and we do provide this service in partnership with our member municipalities through their planning department, their building services department. We work hand in hand with them to deliver these programs. So I'll briefly touch on planning, but I really want to focus mainly on the regulation part of it because I think this is more relevant to this evening's event. I'll touch on that a little bit more. So you may ask, why is the Conservation Authority involved in planning and regulations? And I think there's some good reasons. We're trying to protect public health and safety, prevent property damage, protect the ecological integrity of some of our resources, and an example would be to protect water quality, and to protect public resources such as public infrastructure and roads. The main thing through the planning process is to try to avoid putting things in the flood hazard altogether. That's number one, is to avoid the hazard. So basically try and keep development away from known hazards like floodplains and erosion hazards. So this is done through municipal planning approvals. There's policies in the official plan and zoning bylaw for Napanee and other municipalities that speak to these things. And the Conservation Authority adds value to that by providing input into the planning process by reviewing those documents such as consents to sever, minor variance and whatnot, to ensure that property is protected. The second way we do it is through a regulation, and the regulation, there are two of them, one for Cataraqui, which is Ontario Regulation 14806, and one for Quinte Conservation, which is 31909. And the regulation regulates all types of development and site alteration in or near hazardous areas. And again, the purpose is to protect people and property from damage and to ensure changes to properties do not negatively affect other properties like your neighbors. So we look at it more than just on a property scale. We try and look at it on a shoreline reach scale so that something that you may do on your property doesn't adversely affect your neighbor in some way and cause them grief. Typically there are horizontal, so elevation and vertical setbacks that we try and enact to keep people back from the hazard and to raise their structures to floodproof them essentially for when we get these high water events. So many people often ask where the regulation applies. And the regulated areas are specific to features, essentially, such as Great Lakes, shorelines, river and stream valleys, hazardous lands, wetlands, and we also have, we regulate adjacent to those features. And that's how we can apply these setbacks to protect property. The other part of the regulation is alteration and/or interference with shorelines, watercourses, and wetlands. Things like channelization, retaining walls, bridges, culverts, those things are subject to the regulation, again, to ensure that whatever's being done is not exacerbating the problem or aggravating the hazard or causing flooding to somebody else or causing more erosion by some activity that's being done, whether it be one of those types of projects or something else. Development typically includes buildings, site grading, placement of fill, all of those things are regulated in these regulated areas. So for, let's say Napanee, for example, we don't regulate the whole municipality. We just regulate the shorelines, the creeks, rivers, water bodies, those types of features, and a certain setback from that. So if you have any questions about whether a portion of your property is regulated or not, I would suggest you just simply give us a call, and we can look it up on our mapping and find out if your project is regulated. Because I know we're talking mostly about shorelines tonight, but there's a lot of other types of development that is set back from the shoreline that may be regulated as well. It's just helpful to call your conservation authority and find out if any sort of permitting is required. Again, staying with the permitting side of things, often people will ask, well, how do I apply for a permit, and what's my best and shortest means to getting a permit and being successful in getting a permit? We highly recommend pre-consultation, that you contact the Conservation Authority before you apply, so that we can ensure you are submitting as complete an application as possible, and that will really cut down on any delays. It's also advantageous to discuss your project with an experienced contractor or consultant, particularly for shoreline works. Every site is different, and so it's really helpful to have someone, whether it be a Conservation Authority staff person or an experienced contractor, to come out and advise you as to which method of protection may best suit your site. I can't even begin to list the number of types of protection that are out there, and they vary depending upon topography of the site, height, depth of the shoreline, the soil type, you name it. So it's always good to talk to someone who's experienced. We do ask for plans, like a plan view drawing or a cross-section drawing, and certainly if you have a consultant or contractor, they can assist you with that. And we also have example diagrams in our application package, and I think we have some tonight on our table out in the other room as well, if you're looking for them. Include photographs of the site, that's always helpful. And oftentimes, especially for shorelines, before you even apply, we'll simply ask for you to send photos. And I was talking to a number of people tonight, and that's one of the things I suggested. If you could email me some photos, it saves me a trip out, and it can allow me to see your shoreline and give you some advice as to what I think should happen there. So permit application packages are available on our websites, which are listed there, by email, or pick up at your local CA office. So some of the key messages. The big one, to begin planning now, because if the water levels are going to be high again, you don't want to wait until that is happening. It's too late at that point. You almost have to wait till the following year till the water levels go back down, or at least late in the fall, when you can actually do the work on the shoreline. So now's the time to start talking with contractors or the Conservation Authority if you haven't already. I've already spoken with a number of you folks tonight who have been in contact with our office, and that's wonderful. Because it's likely, if property is along a shoreline, it's regulated, and a permit is needed for most development in regulated areas, including shoreline and in-water work. Again, I can't stress enough pre-consultation, highly encouraged to reduce potential for delays. And we can provide technical advice to assist you with your project, or direct you to resources that can help. We have consultants and contractors lists in our offices that we're certainly wanting to share with you if you need them. And believe it or not, the permit process is actually not that onerous. Contrary to popular belief, generally processing of an application takes between 5 and 20 business days, and the key there is it needs to be a complete application. I did run some metrics of our own permitting program last year, and we issued about 350 permits, and on average it took us 5 days to issue a permit from the time we had a complete application. Again, I'd like to stress the complete application. I know I keep repeating it, but the pre-consultation side of it, to make sure that we have everything we need to issue a permit, helps avoid delays. I'd also like to point out that we do provide an expedited review process, especially for emergency situations. I think the town of Napanee operations department would vouch that we do expedite things for, say, for road work that needs to be done. If there's a serious erosion problem, I know there was one in Amherst Island in Loyalist Township that up against the lake that we expedited a permit there so that they could get out and get the work done as soon as possible. Also, if something like your home, certainly your septic system or structures on your property are threatened, we will certainly expedite a review of that application so that you can get the protection you need as soon as possible. And that's all I have to say, but I do want to leave you with some helpful links to the IJC website, and we do have copies of this out in the other room at our desk. They did come out with a really helpful high water questions and answers document recently that is available on the website listed there. And then there's also current conditions, flows, and forecasts that I'm sure you folks would be interested in. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.